Welcome back, friends. It's a new year, a new Dataslate, a new meta, and it's time to take a look at the first week of results. And we'll take a look at the winners and losers. We'll do a faction focus. We'll take a little bit deeper dive on Dark Angels and Necrons, and we'll take a look at the current overall meta, even though it's only been 1 or 2 weeks. So sit back, relax, and let's get right to it. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, if you find this video helpful or informative, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support me and support the channel, and I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. All right, so for last week, we had 444 players, and so far for the data slate, we've had 718 players. We had 2,176 games, and for the data slate, we're at almost 3,500, and we had 10 tournaments last week and 19 total for the data slate. So the first thing we're going to look at is Armies win percentage for the previous week. So first things first, the Asher Militarum continues a good win rate, even after some nerfs from the last data slate. They were definitely one of the top contenders at the end of the last data slate, and they're still going strong so far. Necrons are riding the new Starshatter Detachment to a good win rate over the first few weeks as well, up over 56%. And the Death Guard and Thousand Suns struggled for the first week, down under 40%. Looks like their armies are going to need a little bit of time to figure things out with the new changes. Alright, next up we have the Army Representation. So far, for the last week, Necrons made up almost 10% of all the players, with over half those players in their detachment being a Starshatter detachment. Space Marines had a good bump in players since the data slate. They had some buffs, so that brought some more players back. They're up to almost 7%. And Tyranids and Asher Militarum and Custodes are showing over 6%. And even Demons are up over 6% with the 4 new detachments they came out. All the Demon players are getting a little excited and trying out those new detachments. And then down at the bottom, Thousand Suns only at just over 1% and Drukhari just under 1%. Clearly those armies are not doing so hot right now, and the people are sort of migrating away from them. And next we're going to move on to players who went X-0, at a tournament, so players who only lost 1 game or didn't lose any games during a tournament. So there are 4 armies near the top in the percentages, all of them over 28%. We got Necrons, Tyranids, Asher Militarum, and Adeptus Mechanicus. All those ones that are there are pretty standard, what you would expect, except Adeptus Mechanicus. They were not doing so hot last data slate, and now they're up over 26%, or almost 29%. So it's nice to see them get a little bump there. Some players are having some success with them. And then down at the bottom, we have a lot of armies who just struggled last week. Death Guard, Thousand Suns, Drukhari, Black Templars. They didn't have any players who had any success, really. Everyone was just either lost half or most of their games. So they definitely are struggling a little bit, but it's only the first week, not a lot of players either, so it's going to take a little bit to sort out the growing pains of a new data slate and some new detachments. So here we have a chart that shows win rates, X-0 percentage, and representation all put together, so you can get an idea of how it looks when you combine all the stats together. So, at the top, Asher Militarum, they're 58%, almost 29% X-0, and 6.3%, Army Representation. Necrons, again, 56, 30, and almost 10%. So you can see those armies up there doing very well in all of them. Drukhari is kind of a weird exception. They're at 52%, so they had a good win rate, but they had no X-0, so they had no one who really did really well with them. So it looks like everyone who played Drukhari just kind of had a mid-tournament, going 3-2, 2-3. So that's the equivalent of a mid-table army right there. Not going to see any success, but just does enough to win enough games. Let's take a look at some of the other standouts here. If we go down, we can see Adeptus Mechanicus, 43% win rate, but they had almost 29% X-0 percentage. So that means that a small portion of the player base had a lot of success, but the rest of the army did not. So those few people found a way to do well with them, and it sort of propped up the win rate. If those players didn't do well, I would assume that Adeptus Mechanicus' win percentage would be down in probably the 30s without them. And down at the bottom, we have the 3 Mono God Chaos Space Marine armies. You got World Eaters, Death Guard, and Thousand Suns. All of them struggled pretty bad out of the gate here. 40%, 35%, 31%. Extremely low X0, X1, if 0%. And I mean, the army representation for Death Guard and World Eaters is a little bit above average, the average being 3.8, but Thousand Suns just down at 1.1%. So not a strong showing from the Chaos side of things so far, but hopefully they'll turn that around with a little bit more players and a little bit more time to sort things out. All right, and this is the tournament wins for each army last week. So we only had 10 tournaments. Necrons, Dark Angels, and Astra Militarum, they all won 2. And then you had Tau, Gene Stealers, Death Watch, and Adeptus Custodes all winning 1. So not a lot to go on so far, but a good spread. No one's winning all of them in 1 week, which is nice to see. All right, and we're going to do a little faction focus on the Dark Angels. Here we're going to take a look at some of the specifics of their data and see what's doing well and how the army's performing. So first off, the representation has been pretty good since the last data slate. It's been going up a little bit, which is nice to see. The win rate has been climbing up as well. They didn't in the last 8 weeks before that, or 6 weeks before that, sorry. The highest they got was 47%, and they had a 51-49% the last 2 weeks, which is nice to see. The Gladius Task Force still is getting a majority of the players. Almost 55% of players are taking the Gladius Task Force to the table, with the Lion's Blade being only, the new detachment, the Grotmas detachment, being only 10% of people. And we're looking at the performance of the sub-factions. The Lion's Blade, the new one, is sitting at 33% win rate, so not doing too hot. The 2 detachments that are kind of carrying everything right now is the Vanguard and the Stormlance. So even though Gladius was a majority of the players, they still only had a 49% win rate. So, you know, it's not bad, it's average, but the people who played the Vanguard or Stormlance were 68 and 62%, so they did a lot of the heavy lifting to get that win percentage up a little higher than it probably should have been. So the next faction focus we're going to look at is the Necrons. The representation has almost doubled since December 16th, so this is roughly when Starshatter sort of took off. Win percentage also kind of going up to 56%, 53%, so you know they've been slowly getting a little bit better. They're always a very high represented army anyways. They're very popular, but it's really jumped like crazy in the last week, so a lot of that is definitely attributed to the new detachment. If we look at the sub-faction player base, we can see that Starshatter, the new detachment from Grotmas, had 50% of the players playing it, with no other detachment making up over 20%. So even Hypercrypt is only 19.6%, so they didn't even make it to 20. So definitely a big hit with the Starshatter. And if you look at the win rate, there's 2 detachments really carrying the win rate for this army. You have Starshatter doing 60% and Hypercrypt doing 61%. All the other ones are down around 40%, except the Phalanx, which is at 53%, so they're not doing too bad, but they had a very low representation of players, only 3.6%, so they didn't really factor into the numbers too much, but definitely Hypercrypt and Starshatter is doing the heavy lifting for the faction. And then we just take a look at the current, all the numbers and rank them against all the other 26 factions. They're number 1 in players, they're number 1 in games played, number 3 in win percentage, number 1 in representation. Their X0X1 is number 2, and their Tournaments 1 is number 2. So they are in the top 3 of all the categories, so they're definitely shining bright right now. All right, and we're going to look at the total win percentage by army for the data slate so far, which is only 2 weeks. So there's not a ton of data to go off of, but we'll just take a little glance here. Necrons and Sisters of Battle both performing at the top, but still pretty much within that acceptable range, 55.6 and 54.6% win rate. Agents had a 60%, but there's only been 1 player over the last 2 weeks, so we're not going to really include that. Good mix of players in the center there, with between the 45 and 55%. But we got at the bottom we got Death Guard and Adeptus Mechanicus and Black Templars all under 40%, so they're definitely struggling a little bit. Might take them a few weeks to get their feet under them in the new meta and the new data slate and with the new detachment. So hopefully they'll be able to pick it up and sort of pull themselves back up into the rest of the field. And here we have Army Tournament wins week by week. So this, every color is a different week. So the red is week 2, blue is week 1, and this is all the tournaments that armies have won during that time. Astra Militarum continues winning a lot of tournaments. They were dominating most of the tournament scene at the end of the last data slate, and they're still up at the top right now. So they had a few wins last week and a few wins the first week, and same as Dark Angels, they had 2 and 2. So They're the two armies right now that are definitely sitting at the top, but there's not enough tournament data right now to really get any specific info on. You only have 19 tournaments. Once we start getting up around 50 or 60, we'll start seeing that sort of spread sort of develop through all the other armies. But right now, just nice to take a quick look and see how everyone's doing. And that's it for the first few weeks of the new data slate. If you are interested in any of the charts that you've seen, they're available at my website, warpfriends.wordpress.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support me and support the channel so I can keep bringing you guys more content like this. I'll be posting another video next week once the new results are out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.